Hi, I'm Alara, and my own mother once delivered a cutting joke at my sister's engagement party, a cruel jab that my fiancé was merely a figment of my imagination. They'd relegated me to a table by the bustling kitchen, complete with a place card that chillingly read, +1 if real. Little did they know he'd arrive in a way that would silence their petty doubts by landing a helicopter just outside. But this isn't solely about a grand entrance. It delves into the painful reality of what transpires when your own flesh and blood turns your love, your hard-earned success, and your very truth into a demeaning punchline. So before we delve into the story of familial skepticism turned spectacular surprise, tell me, have you ever felt underestimated by the very people who should have cherished you most? Let me show you what unfolded when I finally stopped explaining and started undeniably showing them who I truly was. When the group chat pinged to life with a message boldly titled, "Bianca and Dustin's Big Weekend," a familiar wave of obligation washed over me. I knew the script smile, politely offer some gracious remark, play along with the charade. That's what I always did, nod, smile. Pretend I tapped the message, the itinerary unfolding on my screen. Friday, welcome dinner. Saturday, engagement party. Sunday, brunch. Then came the inevitable Barb, small, smug, and bearing the unmistakable signature of my sister Giselle. "Hope your fiancé can make it this time, Alara." I stared at my phone screen for a beat too long, my thumb hovering over the reply button. But a wave of weariness stayed my hand. Instead, I closed the app, tossed the phone face down onto the cool kitchen counter, and leaned heavily on the granite island. Jensen wasn't even back from his business trip in Stockholm yet, and already they were setting their petty traps. They had never truly believed me, not really. When I'd announced my engagement the previous year, my mother's initial reaction wasn't joy. It was suspicion, sharp and accusatory. "Why haven't we met him?" she demanded, her tone laced with disbelief. "Are you sure he's real?" It was as if they thought I'd conjured a man into existence simply to make those excruciating family dinners slightly less unbearable, or to finally silence the incessant whispers at every wedding, baby shower, or religious holiday where my unmarried status was the elephant in the room, the unspoken centerpiece of their pitying gazes. Jensen and I landed in San Francisco on a Wednesday afternoon. He had a crucial meeting scheduled in Palo Alto, so I took the rental car and headed to Napa Solo for the rehearsal dinner. The venue was predictably ostentatious, a sprawling estate boasting pristine white columns, cascading champagne fountains, and an actual harpist, delicately warming up by the opulent bar. I pulled my coat tighter against the evening chill, stepped inside, and scanned the meticulously printed guest list for my assigned table. That's when I saw it, Alara Vance +1 if real. The breath hitched in my throat, not with a gasp, but with a cold sinking dread. My heart didn't race. It plummeted. The cruel place card sat at the lonely end of a long, glittering table nestled between my accomplished cousin Raphael, a tech executive, and my formidable Aunt Tanya, a dermatologist from New York City, the kind of table where I was always seated close enough to be tolerated, yet strategically far enough away to be conveniently forgotten. They weren't just skeptical, they were deliberately cruel. They wanted me to know with their petty passive-aggressive jab that no matter how high I soared, how diligently I worked, how much I built with my own two hands, if they couldn't physically see it, touch it, dissect it, then in their narrow minds it simply wasn't real. I walked slowly towards the back of the room, away from the boisterous greetings and forced laughter. My heels clicking softly against the polished tile, the sound echoing under the cavernous ceiling. I could have left, I fleetingly considered. I could have slipped out unnoticed, driven back to the city, and told Jensen we'd skip this entire charade. But I didn't. I stayed, not for them. Not even entirely for Jensen, but for Bianca. My sister and I weren't close anymore, not since she had chosen the path of comfortable silence over offering me even a sliver of solidarity, the year I'd made the difficult decision to leave graduate school. But tonight was still her night, her moment. And despite everything, she deserved a semblance of peace. I adjusted the strap of my small shoulder bag, smoothed the non-existent crease on my dress, and walked towards her with the most genuinely believable smile I could muster. She looked radiant, her makeup subtle and flawless, her hair styled in perfect waves. Her smile thankfully seemed genuinely happy. "You made it," she exclaimed, hugging me lightly. "I did, I replied, trying to inject some warmth into my tone. Wouldn't miss it. Just then my mother, Serena, approached, flanked by my Aunt Sonia, whose perfectly sculpted eyebrows arched dramatically the moment she laid eyes on me. Well, if it isn't the world traveler, Serena said, her voice dripping with a saccharine sweetness that never quite reached her cold eyes. Back just in time to be photographed next to a wedding cake. Maybe she finally brought that imaginary pilot this time, my mother added, taking a delicate sip from the glass of white wine she hadn't offered to share. I'm here alone, I stated, my voice even. Jensen has a crucial business dinner. He'll be joining us tomorrow. Of course he will, Sonia drawled, turning to Bianca with a knowing smirk. Remember when you told me she was engaged? Honestly, I thought it was a bit of performance art. Maybe I'll start a gallery, I retorted, meeting her condescending gaze with a steady one. Your generation always did love dramatic installations. Bianca let out a small involuntary laugh. It didn't entirely diffuse the tension, but it helped. The uncomfortable conversation fractured like thin ice cracking under pressure, each woman drifting towards another guest. Another glass of wine. Another round of hushed judgmental whispers. I stayed put, letting the familiar sting settle. This wasn't new, the format was just more polished now. Gone were the blatant put-downs in front of relatives, replaced by clever digs, artfully embedded in pleasantries. If you flinched, you were deemed dramatic. If you responded, you appeared defensive. I'd learned to absorb, to let their negativity wash over me like a cold, unwelcome shower. But something about that dismissive place card, something about being mocked before I had even arrived, burrowed deep into my spine. As dinner commenced, I took my assigned seat at the lonely edge of the grand ballroom and looked around. Every other guest had someone to lean into, someone to share bread baskets and knowing glances with. My plus one was real. He just wasn't physically present, and that I knew meant I was fair game once again. A cousin across the expansive table leaned in a smug smirk, playing on his lips. So, he said, his tone dripping with false curiosity, aviation consulting, huh? Does that mean he flies drones for Instagram influencers? Or what? I offered him. A tight, polite smile. He flies the kind of aircraft you'd know about if you ever got upgraded to first class. The air between us instantly chilled, but he wisely refrained from another retort. As I sat there, a bitter laugh bubbling up inside me at my own stubborn decision to stay, yet simultaneously seething at the deliberate cruelty of that place card. Something quiet and resolute began to solidify within me. I remained seated long after the polite applause for a cousin's insipid speech faded slowly, sipping sparkling water that had long since lost its fizz, somewhere between the awkward toasts and the saccharine slideshow of childhood photos. The energy in the room subtly shifted into that indistinct limbo where people begin to mill around again, cocktails clutched in hand, conversation softening into gossipy murmurs. I walked slowly towards the crowded bar, pretending to peruse the extensive wine list. My heels clicked softly against the cool marble, deliberately so. I didn't want to draw unnecessary attention. I simply wanted to observe, to listen, to feel the familiar texture of a room that had always treated me like an outsider who had somehow wandered in with the wrong invitation. As I subtly passed a small group gathered near a towering floral archway, I distinctly heard my name, not loud, not overtly cruel, at least not initially, but sharp and unmistakably mine. She says he's in aviation. My mother stated, her tone carefully, balanced on the precarious edge between feigned curiosity and blatant ridicule. What does that even mean? Is he a glorified flight attendant? A smattering of light chuckles rippled through the small group. Then Sonia added without missing a beat, her voice laced with theatrical disbelief. Maybe he's imaginary. She never actually shows us any pictures. My cousin Rajan chimed in, his laughter a touch too loud. I honestly think she's making him up entirely just for the attention. The group erupted in laughter, a full-bodied, head-thrown-back laugh, the kind people offer at a joke they won't feel a shred of guilt about because they've successfully convinced themselves it was harmless. Merely playful teasing. They didn't see me. I had just subtly passed behind a strategically placed partition of fragrant white roses, a mere 5 feet away, close enough to inhale the delicate scent of lavender in the centerpiece. close enough to hear every single dismissive syllable. I stopped walking abruptly, my fingers clenching tightly around the delicate stem of my water glass. I felt the telltale flush rising in my chest, the familiar pressure building behind my eyes, the subtle tremor in my knuckles. I could have marched right over there, thrown the remaining water in their smug faces, screamed something devastatingly true. I could have unleashed the pent-up years of their condescension with a single cutting sentence. You have absolutely no idea what kind of extraordinary man he is. You've never earned the right to know him, but I didn't. Instead, I turned around and walked in the opposite direction, not towards the restroom to compose myself, not back to my lonely table. I found a small, dimly lit alcove tucked behind one of the oversized velvet drapes near the patio doors. There was a dusty faux ficus tree and a narrow ledge just wide enough to perch on. I sat there, the glass still clutched in my hand, not drinking, not actively thinking, just breathing, trying to quell the tempest raging within me. This was how I had survived countless gatherings with that family for years. Not by shouting, not by dramatically storming out, but by becoming invisible in plain sight, silently absorbing their cruel words and dismissive glances, then meticulously folding them away into some invisible archive they would never be allowed to read. The evening continued to unfold around me, a surreal play of clinking glasses, floating voices passing, waiters and music that shifted to something jazzy and utterly forgettable. I didn't move from my hidden perch. My body remained still, but inside a quiet war was beginning. Not the kind they could readily see, but the profound kind that subtly, yet irrevocably changes. The very way you walk back into a room. I heard a soft rustle of fabric. It was Bianca. She walked up slowly, her elegant gold-embroidered lehenga swishing softly with each deliberate step. She found me without even truly looking, as if she had instinctively known exactly where I would retreat. They don't really mean anything by it, she said, her voice low, almost apologetic. I finally looked up, meeting her tired eyes that seemed weary. Not from dancing the night away, but from years of choosing silence over offering even a sliver of support. You don't have to defend them, Bianca, I said evenly, my voice surprisingly calm. I'm not, she replied, then added after a long, uncomfortable pause. I didn't offer a brittle laugh, and that's when the weight of it truly hit me. Not like a sharp slap, not like a searing sting, but like a dull, quiet ache that settled deep within my bones. She hadn't joined in their cruel laughter, but she hadn't actively stopped them either. I know, I said softly. She stood there for another awkward moment, unsure what to do with her hands or her heavy silence. Then she slowly walked away. That particular kind of silence is far louder than any outright mockery. It's the stark sound of someone deliberately choosing comfort over courage, someone quietly deciding that familial love comes far easier when you don't dare to challenge the ingrained dynamics of the pack. I remained in my hidden alcove for a while longer, letting that painful truth fully settle. My mother's condescending laughter, Sonia's sharp jabs, the feigned interest from cousins who only ever asked about Jensen, not to celebrate my happiness, but to subtly poke holes in his existence, and now my own sister's passive inaction. It didn't feel like one isolated betrayal. It felt like 100 small, precise cuts that had finally reached the very marrow of my being. I wasn't going to dramatically leave. I wasn't going to allow myself the release of tears, and I certainly wasn't going to pretend anymore. I stood up, smoothed the front of my dress, and walked back into the main hall. Just as the event planner adjusted the microphone on the small stage, the room was already subtly shifting again. Plates being quietly cleared, the lights gently dimming, dessert carts being discreetly wheeled out. I moved through the remaining clusters of guests, as if I belonged there because, in truth, I did. They could continue to laugh, they could cling to their petty doubts, but what they didn't yet comprehend was that they were inadvertently giving me exactly what I needed. The quiet fuel for a fire they wouldn't see coming. I wasn't going to let them break me, at least not before I'd had a taste of the strawberry shortcake. By the time the elaborate dessert trays were artfully arranged, delicate strawberry shortcakes adorned with fresh berries, a dusting of powdered sugar, and tiny gold forks, already clinking softly, The MC tapped the microphone, his forced joviality echoing through the room. "And now," he announced, his voice syrupy and loud enough to hush the remaining pockets of conversation, "a few heartfelt words from our lovely bride, Ilara Vance." Bond. My chest didn't tighten with anxiety. It dropped with a cold, hard thud. There had been no advance warning, no polite family vote, no courteous request. Just a casual handoff in front of 200 people who likely didn't care whether I spoke or remained silent, so long as their champagne glasses were promptly refilled. I stood slowly brushing the front of my dress with palms that had suddenly gone clammy. My mother's sharp, unreadable gaze locked onto mine from across the room, but the corner of her mouth tilted ever so slightly, as if she had been expecting, perhaps even anticipating, this moment of potential humiliation. Sonia's perfectly arched eyebrows rose even higher, a silent question mark of what flavor of public self-abasement I would serve up this time. And Dustin, Bianca's fiancé, sitting beside her with his arm possessively draped over the back of her chair as if he owned the entire room, let out a short, dismissive puff of laughter. "Guess we're really doing this," he muttered to no one in particular. I walked towards the small stage, my steps deliberate and poised slower than usual, measuring not just the physical distance to the microphone, but the emotional decades it had taken me to finally arrive at this unexpected precipice. And then, just before my trembling fingers brushed against the cool metal of the microphone, my mind flickered back to the very first moment I had met Jensen. It was 2 years prior, on a vibrant rooftop bar in Barcelona. He was in the city consulting on a complex fuel logistics system for a fleet of private jets. I was there branding a high-end watch startup. We had both reached for the same uniquely mixed cocktail, mine a carefully crafted mocktail, his decidedly not, and had shared a genuine laugh when the bewildered bartender presented us with the accidental concoction. We talked for hours that night, a surprisingly deep conversation that spanned our demanding work lives, our complicated families, and the shared exhaustion of constantly having to explain why our unconventional lives didn't neatly fit into other people's narrow checklists. I vividly remembered the first time I had tentatively told my mother about him. Aviation consultant. She had repeated, her tone dripping with skepticism. "So, he books flights? Are you absolutely certain this isn't just another one of your imaginary projects?" I held that dismissive memory close, wrapping it in every bitter glance, every condescending comment, every single moment they had subtly or not so subtly asked me to justify my own happiness. Then I looked out at the expectant crowd and began to speak, my voice surprisingly steady. "Hi," I said, simply. "I won't take up much of your time. I know we're all eagerly awaiting dessert." A scattering of polite, expectant chuckles rippled through the room. "I just wanted to say that it's truly beautiful watching two people find a love that is genuinely supported, celebrated, and wholeheartedly believed in. Not everyone is so fortunate. So if you do find that kind of unwavering support, hold on to it with both hands." A palpable silence descended over the room. Not the awkward kind, but the kind that subtly dared someone to break it with the first hesitant clap. Then a few scattered hands tentatively offered applause, followed by a low murmur of agreement from someone who likely hadn't truly absorbed my words, but felt compelled to react. But I hadn't spoken for them. As I stepped away from the microphone, I caught Giselle shifting uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes darting nervously toward Sonia, whose mouth had gone thin and tight. Bianca didn't look up. She stared intently at the pristine white tablecloth, as if she could somehow magically disappear into its intricate weave. I passed Serena on my way back to my lonely table. She leaned slightly towards her untouched wine glass and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "Well, that was cryptic." Dustin smirked, his eyes following me with a mixture of amusement and disdain. "Still no sign of Mr. Aviation, huh?" I didn't bother with a verbal reply. I simply offered him a small, enigmatic smile, the kind of smile that isn't meant to comfort but to subtly warn. They foolishly thought I was merely giving a polite, perfunctory toast. They didn't yet realize that I had just fired the opening shot in a silent war they hadn't even seen begin. Even as the polite murmur of my brief speech settled beneath the clinking, just the back of a head, barely illuminated by a harsh catering lamp. The grainy caption underneath read, Backstage vibes, LOL. That was me. That's all I got. A ghost in someone else's carefully constructed story. I scrolled through the comments. Such a magical day. Clara looks divine. Deanna, you're glowing. There were effusive shoutouts to bridesmaids, uncles, even Clara's college roommate. Chloe received a gushing thank you for her incredible words and unwavering friendship. No one mentioned me, not even in passing. No thank you to family who traveled. No grateful acknowledgement for everyone who supported us. I had been there, I had shown up, I gave a gift, I wore the dress, I took up space. And yet somehow they had made it look like I hadn't. Not forgotten, removed. I stared at the screen numb. Then with a sudden surge of something akin to defiance, I typed a message. Riley, hey, I'm just curious. Was I deliberately left out of the wedding photos? I didn't expect a response that night. But 15 agonizing minutes later, a reply popped up. Clara, I didn't really handle the photo selections. Deanna coordinated with the photographer directly. I wasn't involved in all the final edits. Sorry if you felt excluded. If I felt excluded, I reread the message, the words cold and clinical, like she was managing a customer service complaint. No acknowledgement of the years of being overlooked. No genuine remorse, just sterile distance wrapped in 3 lines of fake neutrality. I didn't respond. I sat in the suffocating silence of my apartment and stared at the Tiffany box still sitting on my kitchen counter, a gleaming symbol of their rejection. The tape was still stubbornly intact. I hadn't had the stomach to look at it again. But now it was more than just a return package. It was a trophy of their calculated erasure. I opened my laptop not to write not yet. Instead, I clicked on the wedding photographer's profile. She had posted a highlight reel. Same flawless angles, same beaming guests, same sickly sweet filter. I searched for my own name in the tags. Nothing. I wasn't just invisible. I was deliberately untagged, untouched, untold. I turned off the screen, my face a carefully constructed mask of indifference. No tears, no trembling lip, just a chilling stillness. But inside something was shifting. My spine, for the first time in a long time, straightened. There comes a moment when silence curdles into guilt, when watching it all happen without uttering a word means you're allowing them to define you. I had played that role for far too long. Smiling thinly at veiled insults, nodding numbly through blatant exclusion, rationalizing people's cruelty as simply how they are. But I had seen the curtain pulled back now, and once you see it, you can never truly unsee it. They hadn't wanted a sister. They had wanted a shadow, one who would stay perpetually on the edge of every memory just far enough not to ruin their perfect picture. Well, if they wanted me invisible, they were about to learn the deafening roar of what silence truly looks like when it finally decides to speak. Evening settled over Raleigh like a heavy, suffocating quilt. I sat at my small dining table, the harsh overhead light casting long, unforgiving shadows. The air in the apartment felt stale, stagnant. My phone rested beside a cold mug of chamomile tea I had never bothered to drink. Across from me sat the Tiffany box, its presence somehow louder now than when it had first arrived. A returned gift, a rejected gesture, a perfectly wrapped symbol of everything I wasn't allowed to be. I picked up my phone, not to mindlessly scroll this time, but to look, to really look. Buried deep in my camera roll was the photo I had taken at the wedding. I didn't even remember snapping it. It was grainy, dim, badly framed. Just a blurry shot of a gray folding chair, a name card that read Riley +1, Clara's sister, and the indistinct blur of a server rushing past the kitchen door. There was no drama in it, no tearful confrontation, just quiet, stark humiliation captured like a forgotten afterthought. But it was real. That single imperfect photo said everything the polished speeches had glossed over, everything the curated posts had deliberately edited out. It wasn't a protest, it was irrefutable proof. I opened Instagram, then Facebook. I copied the photo into both my fingers, hovering over the keyboard, then moving with an unexpected resolute certainty. Caption, helped plan the wedding secured. The caterer got seated beside the kitchen. Bride said I should understand, so I left quietly. I read it twice. No anger, no blame, just cold hard facts. I tapped post. The quiet that followed felt heavier, more pregnant with unspoken truth than the moment before. I set my phone down, unsure whether to feel brave or utterly foolish. I didn't expect much. Maybe a few sympathetic comments from close friends, a worried, "Are you okay?" message. But that wasn't the point. This wasn't for attention. It was a record, a quiet declaration of what had been. An hour passed, then another. And then the ripple started. First it was Dana, my old coworker from the nonprofit, who commented, "I always knew something was off that night. You deserve so much better." Then Sandra, a distant cousin I hadn't seen since our grandfather's funeral. This happened to me at my brother's wedding. Same folding chair, same deafening silence. More likes trickled in, then more comments, DMs from people I'd gone to high school with, from women I barely knew, but who had apparently followed me for years. They weren't just responding to me. They were responding to a shared unspoken pain. I noticed I just didn't know how to say something. "My sister did this to me. It still stings." You put into words what I never could. By midnight, my simple post had been shared over 100 times, then 200. The number kept climbing, but I didn't reply to any of it. I didn't need to. Instead, I refreshed the page once, then let the screen dim. There was a strange power in the stillness, in not explaining, not clarifying, not softening the blow so others could sleep more soundly. I had always been the one to smooth things over, to say, "It's okay, I get it, don't worry." But this time, no. This time, I let the stark truth stand alone. Clara hadn't messaged me. Neither had Deanna, not yet. But I could vividly imagine the frantic group texts, the hushed phone calls happening behind the scenes, the panicked damage control, the conversations that undoubtedly started with, "Did you see what she posted?" What they didn't realize was that I wasn't setting fire to anything. I wasn't trying to tear them down. I was simply stepping away. And when someone like me finally steps away, the silent weight they carried goes with them. That's when people feel the shift. That's when they look around and suddenly wonder why the carefully constructed ceiling feels like it's beginning to cave in. I thought about all the years I had spent desperately trying to earn a seat, not just at a wedding, but in the family, in the photos, in the carefully curated narrative they spun at holidays. I had fought so hard to be seen, valued, remembered. But the folding chair, it gave me something none of that desperate striving ever could: perspective. I saw the guest list from the outside. I saw how easily silence could be weaponized, spun into irrelevance, and I saw with absolute clarity how often I had allowed it to happen. Not anymore. I didn't cry, I didn't shake, I didn't scream, I just exhaled. Turned out that pathetic folding chair was the best seat in the house, because from there, I could finally see everything with unwavering clarity. I hadn't expected silence to echo quite so loudly, but it did. 2 days had passed since I shared the photo of the folding chair. The post remained pinned to the top of my profile, quiet and unassuming, but the waves it had sent out were far from still. And now the backlash wasn't from strangers. It was reverberating from inside the house. Clara called mid-afternoon. My screen lit up with her name, a 10-year-old photo of us still attached to her contact. I let it ring. She tried again 10 minutes later. I didn't answer that one either. The voicemail came immediately after. "Hey, I think this is getting out of hand. People are asking questions. Can we talk? I don't want to fight Riley, I really don't. Can you just call me back?" Her tone was tight-strained, a fragile mix of panic and practiced performance. It wasn't an apology. It was a containment strategy. I set my phone down and walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, took a slow sip, then another. The next message arrived quickly, this time from Deanna. "We didn't mean any harm. Please consider removing the post. It's affecting some of our partnerships." There it was, not "We're so sorry you were hurt," but "You're hurting our image." Clean, cold, corporate. By evening, the pressure found another voice, Mom. Her tone was softer, laced with that familiar, carefully practiced, "let's not make this worse" cadence she always used when the family's pristine image risked a crack. "Riley, honey, your sister's really upset. People are talking, she's crying. You made your point, but do we have to air everything like this? We're family, things like this, they should be handled privately." I stood in the middle of my small living room, listening to her voicemail on loop, my hand gripping my phone tighter with each repetition. We're family. Funny how that word only got trotted out when it served to protect someone else's comfort. When I was excluded, overlooked, erased, I was supposed to swallow it in the name of grace. But now that their carefully curated narrative was unraveling, they were suddenly deeply concerned about privacy. Privacy had always been their convenient cover, the rug they so easily swept me under. I walked back to my desk, sat down, and stared at the glowing screen. The post was still open, hundreds of comments now. A chorus of shared experiences. Women, men, people from all walks of life sharing their own stories of pain, of those moments of quiet erasure that had no room at their dinner tables, no seat in their photos. One message stood out stark and resonant. I never knew how to explain what happened to me at my sister's wedding until now. Thank you. I hovered over the post. The delete button was right there, so was the unpin option. Instead, with a quiet act of defiance, I clicked pin to top again, just to feel it lock firmly into place. I wasn't seeking vengeance. I wasn't throwing stones. I was simply done pretending that silence was noble. I took a deep breath and messaged my mom back. I'm not fighting, but I won't erase myself anymore just so others can stay comfortable. There was no read receipt, no telltale 3 dots indicating she was typing. Just a profound stillness, but not the kind I had come to fear. This silence wasn't isolating. It was mine. It held space for the girl I used to be, the one who kept secrets to protect others, who plastered on a smile for family photos. Even when she was standing behind the camera, who bit her tongue every time someone dismissively said, "You're being too sensitive." That girl was gone now. This quiet wasn't weakness. It was strength finally refusing to kneel. Silence used to protect them. Now it protected me. The night after I pinned the post again, I stayed off my phone. No scrolling, no checking comments. I made a pot of Earl Grey tea, put on a jazz playlist I hadn't touched in years, and folded laundry as if my world wasn't subtly unraveling online. But by morning, my inbox had other ideas. A screenshot from my friend Adira arrived first. It was a tweet sharp, viral, and unmistakable. Don't let wedding aesthetics make you cruel. Folding chairs and family wounds don't mix. Underneath, someone had tagged the lifestyle brand Deanna relentlessly partnered with. The comments were brutal. Is this the same Deanna who preaches authentic living while silencing her fiance's sister? This brand supports exclusion now. She blocked her own sister-in-law because her folding chair didn't match the napkins. It had begun. I hadn't asked for this. I hadn't even shared names, but the internet. It has an uncanny ability to connect the dots, especially when the truth leaves a clear paper trail in hashtags and pastel-filtered hypocrisy. Before noon, Deanna's perfectly curated face had vanished from the homepage of her biggest sponsor. The official post was blandly neutral. We're reevaluating our collaboration commitments. But the subtext was screaming. 10 minutes later, the email landed. Subject, you win. Body, you ruined everything. All for attention. For what likes, you made us look like monsters. Was that the plan all along? I hope this makes you feel powerful. You're not the victim, Riley. You're the fire starter. I stared at it for a long moment, not because I hadn't expected it, but because even now, she couldn't bring herself to see the truth. I didn't reply. By that afternoon, Deanna had blocked me on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, even Pinterest. I didn't even know people still actively fought on Pinterest, but she had found a way. Clara's text came hours later. Less rage, more thinly veiled guilt. This isn't fair. She's really hurting. Can't we just move on from this? Move on like I'd misplaced my keys or forgotten to RSVP. No, Clara, I hadn't lost a seat at the table. You made damn sure I never had one. Still, I didn't argue. I didn't lash back. I just muted her thread and placed my phone face down on the kitchen counter. That evening, I sat at the same desk where I had once scrolled through wedding photos, desperately searching for my own face, where I had once cried silent, unseen tears. Now it felt different, charged with a quiet strength. New notifications chimed softly as I typed, slow and deliberate. A message from someone I'd interned with 10 years ago. I remember how you covered for your sister during that office disaster. You've always been fiercely loyal. I'm so sorry it took this long for someone to truly see you. A DM from an old neighbor. Thank you for reminding me that silence isn't strength when it protects the wrong people. And then the one that made me sit back, a genuine sense of something akin to peace settling over me. You didn't destroy her. She built a platform on curated kindness. You just showed people what she deliberately edited out. I didn't feel victorious. There was no triumphant fist pump moment. But I felt grounded, rooted. I hadn't dragged her name through the mud. I hadn't exposed some deep, dark secret. All I had done was tell the truth quietly, fully, and finally without apology. I let the online noise swirl, let Deanna's carefully constructed world tremble under the weight of its own polished facade. And I didn't answer the next dozen texts or tags or mentions, because the bitter irony was Deanna had blocked me, but I had already left. She blocked me, but I wasn't looking for connection there anymore. I was looking for closure. By morning, the online noise had faded, though not entirely disappeared. My phone sat quietly on the nightstand, its screen dark, but I didn't need it to know the world outside hadn't quite forgotten me yet. I hadn't posted anything since the folding chair photo. I didn't have to. The truth was still out there echoing without my needing to amplify it. When I opened Instagram to clear out the lingering notifications, a message hovered at the very top of my inbox. Chloe. The name alone made my stomach clench, not with lingering longing, not anymore, but with a weary recognition the way a faded scar reminds you of where the blade once sliced. I hope you know you were always seen, her message read. I just didn't know how to show up better back then. I stared at it longer than I wanted to admit. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't true accountability. It was something in between, a carefully worded explanation laced with just enough kindness to sting. I didn't answer. Not out of spite, but out of a newfound clarity. The past had spoken its piece. I didn't need to keep it on the line. I archived the message and got up, made coffee, fed my cat Buster. When I returned to my laptop, another email had slid into my inbox. This one was from the journalist who had reached out a few days after my post went viral. Hey Riley, it began. We ran the pitch up the chain, but editorial feels the angle is a bit too sensitive right now. We'd love to revisit later. Best, Emily. I didn't feel disappointment, not really. It was the kind of polite dismissal I had come to expect from places that preferred their stories with sharp edges dulled and their family drama neatly tied up with a bow. Mine had never fit that tidy script. I reread the email, closed the tab, archived that too. The quiet in my apartment wasn't hollow anymore. It was mine. By early afternoon, I finally opened the blank document I had left untouched since TEDx had confirmed my spot. For the first time in weeks, my fingers moved without hesitation. Not every seat at the table is offered, I typed. Some you claim, some you build yourself. It wasn't just a sentence. It was scaffolding for something new. I poured another cup of coffee and kept writing. I didn't check my phone again that day. I didn't need to. The silence didn't hurt anymore. It felt earned. And when evening fell, I sat by the window with a pen in hand, letting my thoughts drift not to the wedding or the folding chair or the ones who had chosen to forget me, but to the ones who hadn't. The ones who had whispered, I saw what they did. The ones who had stayed quiet not because they didn't care, but because they had been taught silence was survival. Now I was learning and perhaps teaching them something else, that silence could be sacred. But it could also be a conscious choice, a form of quiet power. I wasn't here to echo anymore. I was here to build. I stood at my front door, keys still clutched in my hand, my gaze fixed on the cream-colored envelope nestled between junk mail and credit card offers. It wasn't addressed in handwriting I recognized, and there was no return name, just my name neatly printed in block letters. Inside was a single sheet of heavy paper, no embellishments, no flowery borders, just words. I let your sister call the shots because I didn't want conflict. I realize now I silenced you too in my own way. I'm sorry, Dad. Bye, cool. I reread it twice. There were no justifications, no attempts to soften the stark truth. For once, there was no redirecting blame, no you misunderstood, just a raw acknowledgement, late but clean. I left the envelope on the counter and sat on the arm of the couch, letting the stillness fill in the vast spaces he hadn't filled with words. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't reconciliation, but it was something like a door I no longer wanted to walk through, finally swinging shut behind me. 2 days later, the TEDx microphone felt surprisingly light in my hand. The stage was set with a vibrant red carpet, a sleek curved backdrop, and rows upon rows of, ironically, folding chairs. I stepped forward, my breath, even my hands steady. I was seated by the kitchen. I began, my voice clear and resonant, because that's where they thought I belonged. A few murmurs rippled through the hushed crowd, a few heads nodded in quiet understanding. I continued, my voice steady, but devoid of bitterness. And for a long time, I accepted that. I told myself that keeping the peace meant silently sitting wherever I was told. I confused being quiet with being kind. But I've learned that some peace isn't peace at all. It's silence purchased with your own erasure. I paused, letting the weight of my words settle in the room. Sometimes we're seated by the kitchen because that's where they want us, but the view from there, it teaches you everything about what desperately needs to change. There was no applause yet, just a profound, weighty silence, a room full of people respectfully processing the raw truth I was laying bare. I spoke for 11 more minutes, my voice unwavering about the insidious nature of invisible labor, the often one-sided street of family loyalty. The deep ache of knowing your name is known, but deliberately not spoken aloud, in the rooms that truly matter. When I finally stepped off the stage, I didn't feel triumphant, but I felt anchored, as if something vital inside me had finally clicked into place. A woman in her late 40s, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, clasped my hand backstage. "I've been that sister," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "That seat. I know that seat." I didn't smile for their sake. I smiled because for the first time in a long time, I didn't need their approval to know I belonged, fiercely, unapologetically, to myself now. That night, back in my quiet apartment, I finally unpacked the last box I had been avoiding, the one containing the unopened Tiffany tea set. The delicate silver ribbon was still tied from the day I had bought it a lifetime ago. I placed it carefully on my bookshelf, not as a shrine to lingering pain, but as a tangible milestone, undeniable proof that I had shown up even when utterly unwelcome. My phone buzzed softly. Clara again. Another message I didn't bother to open. Some doors don't dramatically slam shut. Some just drift closed over time, gently, almost imperceptibly, until one day you realize you no longer harbor any desire to know what lies on the other side. I stood there for a long moment, my hand resting lightly on the cool glass of the bookshelf, and let the quiet of my home settle around me like a long overdue hug. I no longer had to earn it. Forgiveness isn't always a loud, dramatic pronouncement. Sometimes it's the quiet, resolute refusal to let the same hurt echo twice. Let me know if you'd like to move forward with the next prompt or need a final reflection or conclusion for the story. Sometimes family drama doesn't explode in a fiery confrontation. It erodes quietly, insidiously, slowly chipping away at your sense of self until one day you look around and realize you've been meticulously edited out of your own life story. But true healing, the kind that resonates deep within your bones, begins when you finally stop desperately asking for a seat at their table and instead, with quiet determination, start building your own. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. We're truly listening. And if this story resonated with you, if it stirred something within you, please subscribe to our channel for more raw, honest, and deeply emotional journeys that hit close to home.